Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ruth Ann Moss, and I'm the Executive Director of Birmingham Talks. Birmingham, Alabama earned the nickname the Magic City back in the 1800s because we had everything that you needed to make iron ore. Fast forward hundreds of years later, and unfortunately, our town is not what you would call enchanted if you're a child enrolled in our city school system. 18% of third graders enrolled in Birmingham City schools are proficient in reading. You've heard a lot of numbers today, a lot of data, a lot of statistics, and I want us to take a minute and make this one personal. Take a second, close your eyes, and think about a kid that you adore. Maybe it's your own child or your grandchild, your best friend's son or your goddaughter. Think about the things that you love about them, about the funny things that they say, about everything you hope they'll be when they grow up. And now imagine that there's a 1 in 5 chance that they'll become proficient in reading. That was a reality that I was faced with every day almost a decade ago when we first moved to the Magic City. I was a 4th grade public school teacher, and every single morning I woke up and worked with children who were bright, beautiful, and full of potential and deeply struggled to read. Normally, when you're confronted with a problem this big, it makes sense to kind of trace it back to the beginning and figure out where it all began. Until recently, this has been hard to do in any kind of data-driven way because we didn't have a kindergarten readiness assessment statewide. This year, thanks to leadership from the Alabama Department of Early Childhood Education, we're rolling out our first statewide kindergarten readiness assessment. But you also don't really need a kindergarten readiness assessment to tell you that early learning is important. 90% of a person's brain develops before they turn 5 years old, which is really just one of many reasons that I think 5 is the perfect age for a human being. It is all downhill after that. We're all proof. But Birmingham's mayor, Randall Woodfin, has always been a huge proponent of early childhood education. And in 2018, some committed community members presented him with an opportunity to learn more about some work that had been happening in Providence, Rhode Island with an organization called LENA. LENA is an organization that focuses on interactive talk as the crucial foundation for early brain development and ultimately literacy. Babies need to hear about 21,000 words a day for optimal brain development. If you're curious, that's the cat in the hat about 13 times. Children who grow up in poverty hear on average 4 million words less than their more affluent peers. Just hearing words isn't the only important thing though. What's even more important for babies' brains is engaging and going back and forth with adults in conversation. Early on, that might look more like goos or gurgles, but those back and forth conversational turns are 6 times more impactful on infant brain development than just words alone. LENA believes that something this important should be measured, and so they make a little purple plastic device that I like to call a Fitbit for words. Just like a Fitbit counts your steps, when you turn this device on, it counts how many adult words children hear and how many times they engage in those back and forth conversational turns. LENA also produces curriculum and a roadmap to what it looks like to use this data to coach caregivers so that they can increase interactive talk and help lay a foundation for early literacy. After a lot more learning about this innovation and what its feasibility might be in our community, we launched Birmingham Talks in 2019, seeded by Bloomberg Philanthropies and supported by Results for America. In the time since then, we have learned lots of lessons, but I'm going to share 3 of them with you today. The first thing we've learned is that the need for this in our community is great. Over the past 3 years, the children that we've served, on average, came into our program hearing less than half of those 21,000 words a day that they needed for optimal brain development. The second thing, encouragingly, that we've learned is that the appetite for this kind of evidence-based early childhood innovation in our community is great. This past winter, we had 400 children represented on a waiting list for program services in our child care centers. And then this spring, we had 3 families express interest in every 1 slot we had available in our family program. The third thing we've learned, and this one might be my favorite, is we've learned that this intervention works. A recent third-party evaluation found that children who started our program in lower talk environments increased the amount of interactive talk they were exposed to by about 50% by the end of the program. And so those 3 things, we know that our community needs it, we know that our community wants it, and we know that it works. So what we're focused on is figuring out how to expand it. Over the past 3 years, we've served about 1,000 children, and we're currently actively fundraising to quadruple that number over the next 3 years, with the goal of serving 25% of lower income children in our community by 2025. The other thing that we're focused on is ensuring that we're not keeping this innovation and the lessons that we've learned to ourselves. So we've worked with almost 20 other communities across the state of Alabama to bring Lena technology and programming to their geographic area. Honestly, the last few years have been crazy. We launched a brand new nonprofit in the middle of a global pandemic. We had to figure out how to do things virtually and pivot and pivot and pivot. But most people probably remember March 15th, 2020 as the day that the world shut down, right? I mostly remember March 15th, 2020 as the morning that I woke up and took a positive pregnancy test. 9 months later, our first daughter was born into heaps of racial and economic privilege. And a few days later, we carried her home to a room full of books. And I never, ever wonder if she's going to be able to read them proficiently one day. That is something that every single family in our community deserves to know about their child. I mentioned earlier that about 90% of a baby's brain develops before they turn 5. Interestingly enough, only about 4% of philanthropic dollars given to education focus on the early years. But I'd argue that investing in early childhood education is both a moral and a strategic imperative. It's the right thing to do, because every single kid that's born in our community deserves access to the very best we have to offer way before they blow out 5 candles on a birthday cake. But it's not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do, because to ever be able to truly experience economic prosperity and compete on a global stage, we have to have a diverse, literate, and prepared workforce. And that preparation doesn't start when people turn 18, it starts when they're born. There's a sign that's hanging in my office that says, nobody wins unless everybody wins. And when we invest in kids early, everybody wins. Thanks.